For decades, the Middle East has been a crucible of geopolitical tension, with Iran and Israel at the heart. The rivalry, deeply rooted in ideological differences and regional power ambitions, has simmered for generations.
Central to this escalating tension was Iran's controversial nuclear program, perceived by Israel as an existential threat.
Israel maintained its firm stance. A nuclear-armed Iran was an unacceptable outcome, demanding preemptive action if diplomacy failed.
Years of international negotiations, sanctions, and agreements attempted to curtail Iran's nuclear capabilities, often yielding fragile results.
As diplomatic channels faltered, the rhetoric from both sides grew increasingly hostile, pushing the region closer to the brink. The region existed in an unstable equilibrium, where any spark could ignite a broader, devastating conflagration. Iran's network of regional proxies became a constant source of friction, fueling conflicts across Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen.
Both nations continuously bolstered their military capabilities, conducting drills and deploying advanced weaponry in anticipation of conflict.
The region existed in an unstable equilibrium, where any spark could ignite a broader, devastating conflagration. That spark was struck on June 13, 2025, a date that would forever alter the course of Middle Eastern history. Israeli intelligence had reportedly gathered irrefutable evidence of advanced Iranian nuclear weapons development. The assessment was dire. Iran was nearing a breakout capability, leaving little room for further diplomatic delay. Faced with this perceived imminent threat, Israel made the agonizing decision to launch a preemptive strike. Under the cover of darkness, Israeli air assets prepared for an operation of unprecedented scale and sensitivity. Their mission: to neutralize Iran's nuclear infrastructure and halt its weapons program. Israel immediately declared its intention. These strikes were solely to prevent the expansion of Iran's nuclear program.
The first wave of precision airstrikes targeted dozens of key Iranian nuclear facilities, laboratories, and enrichment sites.
Israel immediately declared its intention. These strikes were solely to prevent the expansion of Iran's nuclear program.
Iran's initial reaction was swift and furious, condemning the strikes as an act of state terrorism and a violation of sovereignty. Iran's initial reaction was swift and furious, condemning the strikes as an act of state terrorism and a violation of sovereignty. Tehran immediately vowed a crushing and disproportionate response, promising to make Israel regret its aggression. The international community largely condemned the Israeli actions, fearing regional destabilization.
World leaders urged both sides to exercise extreme restraint, aware of the catastrophic potential of a full-scale war.
Global markets plunged into chaos, with oil prices skyrocketing and fears of a new economic crisis gripping nations. Across the Middle East, nations braced for the inevitable retaliation, anticipating the ripple effects of the conflict.
Within hours, both Iran and Israel began rapid mobilization, preparing for the conflict to escalate beyond initial strikes.
The region existed in an unstable equilibrium, where any spark could ignite a broader, devastating conflagration. Israel activated its multi-layered air defense systems, preparing for the barrage it knew was coming.
A tense calm descended, a brief, ominous silence before the full fury of Iran's retaliation was unleashed.
True to its word, Iran launched its retaliation, a massive, coordinated assault targeting Israel.
Hundreds of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and armed drones flooded Israeli airspace.
Targets included military installations, key infrastructure, and urban centers across Israel.
Israel's multi-layered air defense system, including the renowned Iron Dome, worked tirelessly to intercept the incoming threats.
Despite the impressive defenses, some missiles penetrated, causing significant damage and casualties.
Israel's northern border with Lebanon immediately erupted as Hezbollah launched thousands of rockets. From Syria, Iranian-backed militias attempted ground incursions and launched additional projectiles. The conflict also spilled into vital maritime routes, with attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea and Gulf region. The comprehensive nature of Iran's response signaled a declaration of total war, pushing the conflict into an uncharted and terrifying phase.
Israel's response was swift and uncompromising, launching a sustained counteroffensive against Iran and its proxies.
Israeli air power penetrated deep into Iranian territory, targeting missile launch sites and command and control centers.
Proxy strongholds in Lebanon and Syria were subjected to relentless bombardments, severely degrading their capabilities. Incoming! Concurrently, Israeli forces maintained an unbreakable defensive posture, protecting their populace from the continuous barrages. Israel responded to the cyber onslaught with its own formidable capabilities, disrupting Iranian critical infrastructure. Along its northern borders, Israeli ground forces amassed, ready for a potential incursion into Lebanon.
In the Gulf and Red Sea, Israeli naval forces established a partial blockade, disrupting Iranian maritime activities.
Beyond military actions, Israel worked with allies to tighten economic sanctions, aiming to cripple Iran's war effort.
Both sides engaged in extensive psychological operations, aiming to demoralize the enemy and rally their own populations.
The conflict rapidly intensified, each retaliatory strike breeding a more severe counter, pushing the region further into the abyss.
Syria, already fractured, became a multi-sided battleground as Iranian and Israeli forces directly engaged. Lebanon bore the brunt of intense fighting, its infrastructure shattered by relentless cross-border bombardments. From Yemen, Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, launched long-range missile and drone attacks towards Israel and maritime traffic. Iraqi militias, sympathetic to Iran, also became active, firing rockets at Israeli and American positions in the region. American military bases throughout the Middle East came under increasing attack, raising fears of a wider global conflict. Wealthy Gulf states found themselves in a perilous position, caught between escalating Iranian aggression and Israeli responses. Vital oil infrastructure and shipping lanes became prime targets, sending crude oil prices to unprecedented heights.
As the conflict dragged on, both nations began deploying previously unseen and highly advanced weaponry. The limited conflict had now fully metastasized into a catastrophic, full-scale regional war with no end in sight.
As the conflict intensified, the United Nations convened emergency sessions, desperately seeking a path to de-escalation.
However, deep-seated mistrust and maximalist demands from both Iran and Israel quickly led to diplomatic impasse. Lebanon bore the brunt of intense fighting, its infrastructure shattered by relentless cross-border bombardments. The United States, while condemning the initial strike, found itself entangled, bolstering its regional defenses.
Europe struggled to present a united front, divided between historical allegiances and humanitarian concerns.
Russia and China called for immediate cessation of hostilities, careful not to alienate either side entirely.
International aid organizations struggled to deliver desperately needed assistance amidst the relentless fighting.
Millions became displaced, creating a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale in neighboring countries.
Numerous attempts at mediation by various international actors met with limited success, often failing before discussions even began.
The conflict's repercussions began to ripple far beyond the Middle East, threatening global stability and prosperity.
After weeks of relentless aerial bombardment, Israeli ground forces commenced a full-scale invasion into southern Lebanon.
The advance quickly devolved into brutal urban warfare, house-to-house combat against entrenched Hezbollah fighters.
Hezbollah's vast network of tunnels and fortifications proved challenging, inflicting heavy casualties on Israeli forces. Reports emerged of Iranian special forces operating directly in Syria, bolstering their proxies' defenses. Iran's air defenses, reinforced by new systems, began to contest Israel's long-held air superiority.
Naval clashes in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea became more frequent and devastating, threatening global shipping.
Iran deployed advanced drone swarms, attempting to overwhelm Israeli air defenses and pinpoint targets. The horrifying specter of chemical weapons use began to loom, as both sides accused the other of preparing such atrocities.
As the conflict raged, civilian casualties on both sides mounted, creating immense suffering and outrage. What began as a decisive strike had spiraled into a protracted, brutal conflict.
Urban centers, once vibrant, became scenes of utter devastation, with residents living under constant threat. Refugee camps across the region and beyond swelled to unprecedented numbers, straining global resources.
Essential infrastructure, as power, water, communication, crumbled under the relentless pressure of sustained conflict. Blockades and disrupted supply chains led to severe food shortages, threatening widespread famine. Medical facilities, under constant attack and lacking supplies, struggled to cope with the influx of wounded. The environmental toll was catastrophic, with vast swaths of land and sea irrevocably damaged by the war.
Centuries of cultural heritage, ancient sites and artifacts were obliterated in the relentless conflict.
The sheer scale of human suffering cast a long, dark shadow across the entire globe.
This was the true, devastating cost of a war born from decades of mistrust and unchecked escalation.
The conflict in the Middle East sent immediate and profound shockwaves through the global economy.
With vital shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea threatened, oil prices surged to unprecedented, crippling levels.
Global supply chains, already fragile, buckled under the strain of disrupted trade routes and increased freight costs. Everywhere, inflation soared as the cost of energy and goods became prohibitively expensive for ordinary citizens.
The world plunged into a deep, protracted recession, affecting billions and threatening social stability.
Beyond the Middle East, a global food crisis emerged as exports dwindled and prices spiraled out of control.
The economic turmoil fueled political instability in numerous nations, leading to protests and governmental collapses.
The cyber warfare, initially confined to the belligerents, expanded, targeting global financial and administrative networks.
Fears grew of broader resource wars as nations scrambled to secure diminishing supplies of essential commodities.
The war between Iran and Israel had not only devastated a region, but irrevocably transformed the very fabric of global stability.
After months of brutal, grinding conflict, signs of exhaustion began to emerge on both sides.
International pressure for a comprehensive ceasefire intensified as the humanitarian crisis deepened. Through back channels, initial, highly sensitive ceasefire talks began, shrouded in secrecy.
However, deep-seated demands and a lack of trust created significant stumbling blocks to any lasting agreement. Only partial, localized truces were occasionally achieved, offering fleeting respite before fighting inevitably resumed.
The cost of achieving peace, after such immense devastation, seemed almost insurmountable.
The protracted war led to significant shifts in regional and international alliances, reshaping the geopolitical map. The vacuum of power and widespread chaos allowed new, extremist threads to emerge and proliferate. Amidst the rubble, tentative efforts to rebuild began, a testament to human resilience.
Yet, the psychological and emotional scars of the war would endure for generations, a heavy legacy. The future of the region remained shrouded in uncertainty, peace a distant, fragile hope.
However, deep-seated demands and a lack of trust created significant stumbling blocks to any lasting agreement. The weight of decades of unresolved grievances had finally crushed any hope of peaceful coexistence. The Iran-Israel war fundamentally reshaped the Middle East and, by extension, the global geopolitical order.